Welcome to UnstuckAF, a podcast here to help you do you better. There's a path that starts where you are, passes through who you are, and leads where you want to go. We're here to hear from people who've walked that path or who are walking it right now. This is Orlando Bishop, Coach Orlando, and I thank you for listening as we learn how to get unstuck, how to be unstuck, how to live unstuck. Unstuck as fuck. All right, y'all. We have a guest today, a friend. There's a couple of levels that we're going to talk about, but I'm going to share this about my friend that we parents, our kids were in school together and known each other since they were in kindergarten, I guess. And he approached me. He'd heard I do stand up, and he approached me about doing this storytelling show I'd never heard of, but he told me about, called Rant and Rave. And if you've seen Unstuck as Fuck, if you see the upcoming, which we're working on, Good Grief, if you've seen pretty much any of my storytelling stuff at all recently, probably over the last, I don't know, close to a decade at this point, this guy has a whole lot to do with it. And that invitation really sparked a lot. It helped me find my voice. So there are a lot of reasons why I wanted him on, and there are a lot of reasons why we're friends, but I've always been really appreciative that he thought of doing that. And he's a magnificent writer himself. He'll talk about that, but everybody, please welcome John Pollono. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I'm glad you brought up that Rant and Rave, because you're also not mentioning the fact that you produced. I myself and Roxanne Hart, we sort of created this dynamic, but for a while there, we were bringing in a guest producer every month. And I think you've done that probably more than almost anybody, which, brought that in. You also did a stand-up comedy show for a little while at the theater, which was fun. Man, I know you found some people, you give them a stage and they just run with it. So you definitely did that.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, that was fun. Homicide. I remember we tried that a couple nights. Roy Wood Jr. came through there.
Yeah, he was funny, man. I remember him.
Yeah,
it's tough. That's a hard gig. That was the theater company's moved a few times since then, but that was to me always like the heyday of when we were on Pico and La Brea, and it was like, that kind of not the greatest neighborhood, and some rough places to park, cars getting broken into, but you came into that sort of place and it was just, it was magic. I always felt so much great things happen there. Yeah. Rant and Rave being a huge one,
and I was amazed at how long it went. How long is there still doing them?
It's still going on.
The pandemic broke it up some, but sorry.
The pandemic paused. About 4 years ago, I stopped producing it and sort of gave the reins over to Betsy and Sarah, and they, I think they're giving it to someone else. It's an incredible amount of work. Roxanne and I did it for literally 12 years.
Wow.
It was nuts. And then, so they're doing it, but the pandemic, it went dark. They just had their first show at the new place at the Matrix Theater, which I think went well. I'm sure they'll be hitting you up to come back in and get back into it. But it's weird. I couldn't make it that night because I had family shit going on. But it'll be interesting to see how much things have changed since the Rant and Rave used to be much more of a safe place to really be inappropriate and talk from the heart. And, I've never seen a more loving, open-minded audience as that Rant and Rave audience.
Absolutely.
And they want to be challenged. They want to be provoked. And, we're just in a weird time now. I think partially because we've been isolated, but also everyone's really terrified of saying the wrong thing. And Rant and Rave was like, let's say the wrong thing.
Right.
On purpose and start a dialogue, because you're in a place of love, and it's like, let it out. Some people's pieces were very angry. Some were funny. Some were offensive. Some were all that stuff. But we're like, this is art, and let's create that. And it'll be interesting to see how that works, making that space again, if it can be.
I'm curious, and we'll get to we said we would take this conversation where it went, but I'm curious, how'd you go about creating that kind of space? Because obviously, it's not as if people have started reacting to the things they hear and all that kind of stuff a minute ago. Obviously, we've kind of gotten to a heightened place.
It's a really good question. I mean, I think the impetus of that show in particular was like, typically a lot of us had done a lot of theater in LA, and typically what you do is you create a production, you do it, you have to rent rehearsal space, and then you rent a theater to do it, and you're in and out. Well, we had built this theater, so we had it. So it was literally like every night that there's nothing going on, you're like missing an opportunity. This is all we wanted was a stage. So we had our productions, we had our stuff, we had our readings. It was like, how do you create something that's writer driven, that's curated and all that stuff. For the first couple shows we did, I mean, for the first one, it took maybe half a dozen of them to figure out the particular things, 1,500 words.
Yeah.
6 writers. The first night was like 2.5 hours long, with no intermission. Just because people would just write, you had no idea. You write it.
What is this?
Until it feels done, and then you do it. And then it was always like 1,500 words is sort of the sweet spot. And all those other things. But it was like, look, I think theater, what always attracted me to theater was like, you go in there, the lights come down, and the material is going to engage you somehow. It's going to make you laugh harder or think or provoke. In many ways, you're prepared to get angry. Right. You're prepared to fucking feel something that you're not feeling outside. And this is an art form that exists. You're breathing the same air. You're doing all that stuff. But like, you're like, when this is done, I want to walk to my car. I want to walk to the lobby. I want to feel something. And even if that's anger, and even if that's like guilt, even if whatever that may be, just have me feel something, because it's this safe place to be provoked. And I think like what we're talking about now is just who knew. Now you're just in a period where things can be taken out of context, and it's not just like, here's the group. It's beyond the walls of where we are. It's just the ridiculous, moment where things have been headed. So I think it was always created as this thing that like, and look, I'm a firm believer, if it comes from a principled, well-intended place, even if you stumble and hurt feelings, if the audience is like, look, I know what you're trying to get at. Yeah. At least the context of it. Sure. It's not, hyperbole. You're not trying to recruit somebody or whatever. You're just like, this is my thoughts. And the point is like, if you're telling me from your heart how you feel and what you think and how you're articulating it, like that's your truth. Yeah. I'm not going to shut that down, and maybe we'll learn from it. But like, nobody's going to step on a stage in a theater and say something unless they are like, have seen some of the world, and they're like, their intention is at the very least to have a cathartic experience with an audience. Of getting that. They're not trying to repress somebody or change something or do that. You know what I mean? That's all. But that was sort of the impetus of it.
So this is the question I want to ask you. How and or when did you realize you wanted to tell stories?
Oh man, that's a good question. I think, for me, it was pretty young, and I think, you as a kid, you kind of gravitate towards that which you feel like you have a knack. Like I've seen it with my kids. My son's a little young, but with Sophie, who you know very well, and I know this, our kids know each other very well, and being able to see that, like, I exposed Sophie to all kinds of sports and arts. Me and my wife did. All that stuff. She really liked softball until she suddenly got to an age where there were girls on that team who were like, bam, hitting it up against the wall. They're working at it, and they're getting it. And she was like, you know what? It's just, she's not in the pocket of enjoying it. But then when she found music, and it was like suddenly tapped into that, it became so much more fun, and you're not forcing them to go to it. Right. So you're like rewarded by it, but you have a knack for it. Now, I've never seen anyone work harder than my daughter to get where she is, but she started with a raw material and a knack and a gift.
And I got to jump in and say, I was fortunate enough to just see her in a production, and I used to sing, and I was The work shows.
You got a great voice, by the way. Yes,
I appreciate that. Like the work. I think for somebody who has done some singing, I'm like, that's not just she can sing. She got up on stage and did it. Like you can see the control. You can see all that. So anyway, I just want to call
for her, it's like for her it was a perfect. I mean, this is a kid who grew up in the theater. I mean, she's 1 year. She's a baby sleeping in her bassinet while we're rehearsing. That's what I mean? So it's in her, so she's able to formulate that. It just happens. So I think, look, man, you hear this Tiger Woods mythology and like, he's like Tiger Woods that kid into being like one of the greatest.
Right.
Maybe you can do that. That's not been my experience.
Yeah.
So to that point is like, I remember being pretty young, in New Hampshire and feeling like something itching. And just, I know when I would read a book, remember books? Like I would read like, I'd get like the book It by Stephen King. And I'd be like, in junior high, and I'd read it in like 3 days. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like devouring it. Something about that got me. And then I started to, dude, it's so funny when I think about it. But in third grade, I wrote this short story. Like everyone had to write a story, and it won like the something. I went to the state capitol and like, got an award from like Judy Blume or whatever it was. At the time. I think it actually was her. And I was in the newspaper and everything. The funny thing is, man, I completely didn't realize, but I plagiarized it. There was a book about like a raccoon in the library that I loved, and I read it, and I just changed the name, and I had my raccoon had like a wife raccoon, and they had babies. No. But like I probably took 50% of that book and just put it and rechanged it. Like I didn't get it. And it won this big award and I got all this stuff. And I remember I had no idea. The thing, like you're this great writer. And I was like, okay, cool. And at third grade. And then I remember my teacher afterwards came up to me and she had the book out of the library and she's like, did you copy this? Like I'd already gotten the fucking award and everything. And I was like, no, definitely not. So that was my first step. I'm not going to snitch on myself.
Right.
But I think, that was in a weird way that kind of set it in there where it was like, that's your thing. Meaning I loved sports. I did all that stuff. I was athletic. I was strong, but I was never great.
Right.
I was never anyone that the captain of any teams. I was never that thing. You know what I mean? I enjoyed it and I did well in that world, but it's the same, what I'm talking about? I just wasn't that wasn't my thing. So I was like, you get rewarded for something, you start investigating it. So to me, it was pretty early on. And then I also, man, it sounds really weird, but when I think about it, I grew up in a really fucking loud household. And like, I think telling stories was a way to be heard, even not necessarily by my family, but just a way to control like everything that came out of my mouth. Like no one listened. It's like too loud. It's no one cares. No one talks. No one asks you anything. But then when you can write something, you can control it. You can have people take a breath out of their day and read your shit. And you're like, okay, I have an audience. So to speak, middle child, all that. You know what I mean? You have an audience.
For sure.
And that's nice.
And you have the floor. Yeah.
You have the floor. That's what it is.
Yeah. We've both been, you much more so around theater, but we've both been in our storytelling spaces. And one of the things I've noticed about your work that I find fascinating is you wrestle in particular with, it's the way I read it, you tell me, but with manhood. You like really, and in interesting ways where I'm like, these are some guys. Like, I feel like sometimes you see stories and it's fine, but like I feel like there's some guys in your story. I'm like, I know him. I know a dude like that. Has that always been where you wanted to go? Like what pushes you to sort of give voice to that piece? Because I could see where somebody might feel like, oh, well, why would you give that kind of guy? We want to move on to a more evolved guy or whatever.
I don't struggle with that at one iota. It frustrates me, in fact, because good storytelling, I think, shouldn't be that calculated. Like whenever you write something and they're like, well, we need more of this, you need evolve this. It's like, what's the truth? You got to dig in to that peat moss of your fucking soul in your life.
Yeah.
And you do that. And if you're honest about those characters, and I write just as many women and men in the same things, you just have to be honest about them and make them, interesting and riveting and flawed and complicated. And look, I happen to know I've had success. I've had a window into a certain type of masculinity that I can, what's the word? Like code switch in.
Yeah.
I have one foot out the door of being an artist. I've always like athletics, fighting, tough guy, all that stuff that I'm in. I always had a foot out the door because I was like, I want to be an artist in a hidden way. But so you have access to that. You know what I mean? And I think like, again, one of my favorite books is The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. Our favorite
writer. So I haven't read it. Yeah, sorry.
It's about the Vietnam War. It's amazing. But his whole thing is like the only truthful way, there's no truthful way. You can't write a war story. It can't be truthful, and it's not glorifying, and it's not glorifying it. You can only way to tell a war story is to tell the truth. You know what I mean? You can't manipulate it. It's false. And that's what that book is. There's chapters that are fictionalized, there's chapters that are autobiographical, but most of it's a combination of the two, and you get it on an instinctual level, what he's saying.
Yeah.
And I always think that that's the way life should be. It's like, if you're reflecting the truth, you're gonna, you don't choose the characters that you want to tell. You want to do it. You don't want to that's why I get so frustrated with this idea that you're changing the world by creating a utopic version of it. And some people do that very skillfully. I mean, look at them, look at all these superhero movies. We love seeing all that shit.
Yeah.
Look, I'll go to that too. I just know who I am as a writer and as a creator.
Right.
I have to create something that is truthful. And like I said, what Tim O'Brien did, which is so instructive, is like you create something. Sometimes war is funny in his book. Sometimes it's horrifying. Sometimes it's beautiful. Sometimes it's all those things, because that's the truth of it. And he puts it in there and he creates it. And then it's up to you to see what you take from it.
Yeah.
But if he was like, I want to make a war story that's only showing a type of soldier who is trending at the moment in contemporary, that's just not truthful. Now, I think you always have to come again from a principled place of, I feel like, consuming this art is going to move the needle in a deeper awareness. Because, man, I do think the more we know about each other in an open mind, flaws and all, roller coaster of the story and all, it's going to lend ourselves to compassion and that. But it may not be reflected in the story. It may be reflected in you.
I love that, because that's where I want to go as you were giving that answer, is to audience. And you mentioned, people may go on stage and maybe you don't want to say this, or you don't want to say that, or you don't want to end up going viral, and you don't want to, right? And I get that that's out there. I'm curious to hear more from you on sort of what you specifically see there, and how you'd like to see an audience engage. Because I know you're a critical thinker. So it's not as if you're just sitting in a theater and it's like, oh, let it wash over me and don't think. So I know you're seeing the issues. How can we engage around that, critique, but not slide into that space where it just feels like the creators won't want to create?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing. And look, I think, to back up a little bit, what attracted me to theater, which I sort of fell into by accident. I moved out to LA to want to write movies and TV, of which I wrote a bunch of screenplays, and they were not good because they were derivative of other movies. I was like writing a movie about other movies. Theater, when I was finally exposed to that, when I went to a conservatory, which is where I met my wife and so many of my dearest friends to this day, it was you study theater. They give you a play. They don't give you they're not giving you a scene from, Reservoir Dogs. Right. They're giving you're reading Arthur Miller and Teresa Rebeck. You're doing really, really great work. And what I loved about theater, it was like, this is very complex. The material is commenting on culture, and it's commenting on the characters, but it's also challenging the audience. You see? And I loved that, because I was like, this is great. For example, you know how, like, if you're telling a story and you have somebody in your family who's like racist or politically different than you, and you're trying to tell a story and you're contorting because you don't want to give them anything to take the wrong way. Right. That's exhausting. And I was like, theater is a place you don't have to do that. You just have to tell the truth, and the audience will process it, because they're there to be provoked, to learn. They're there to have more questions thrown at them than answers, as opposed to film and stuff like that. So I love that about theater. And I love that. And again, to go back to Rant and Rave was an incredible lesson of giving the idea, and you're part of this, is like giving someone a platform. You're not writing the piece for them. Right. You're not plucking someone random and saying, oh my God, I need a black dude with the dreadlocks in the show. Come do it. Which is, by the way, I think the marathon of it, which it is to say, I invest in excellence in terms of writers in Rant and Rave. We all did. Yeah. Excellent people who need to do it. You can give them a platform, you work with them, it's work, but let's give a mechanism to discover excellence and let that excellence thrive, which is really the marathon of what we're talking about here. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And in Rant and Rave, what it was is like, if you get a storyteller up there, no matter who they are, sexual orientation, gender, race, doesn't fucking matter. if they're great storytellers and they're specific in their story, they're going to move people. You're going to find facets of yourself in them. And it's like, you could be a fucking former gang member black dude, which we've had, waiting in the wings and seeing some like 70-year-old Jewish woman tell a piece about heartbreak, and they come off and then they go up and they're hugging and they're like, that's great, because it's like, I'm seeing you illuminate.
Yes.
You're bringing me news. You are using your language to speak your truth. And your truth doesn't have to make me feel better about my truth. It doesn't have to pat me on the back. You know what I mean? Like, we were fucking invisible producers. But what I saw was like, okay, this takes work. It takes work to find someone like you, to give them that platform, to edit it, to work at it, to be like, hey, come back, come do this.
Right.
Do some pieces, learn to do that, give them that platform. And that's why, I get really bothered so much by a lot of this hot take trend we have, where it's like, you're not putting in the work. Like, to me, the equity is like, look, let's create a level playing field and invest in the excellence of people. Now, look, there's definitely people who haven't had the opportunity to be excellent.
Sure.
You get them up there, let's throw some pitches at you, let's see what you do. But if you're not hitting those pitches, you know what? There's somebody else who can.
Yeah. So let's
Or I'm sorry, man, that maybe it ain't your sport, but like, let's find that. Because because again, when you see a storyteller plant their feet and do it, like, it transcends.
It really does.
It's incredible. So that's what we always invested in the show, and that's what I did. And to your point with theater, like, it never mattered to me one iota what the gender, sexual orientation, any of that fucking things. When the play and the artist and the material was resonant and connecting, it transcended it. And that beauty, that's always what I want. That's what I want to create, and that's what I want to consume. Producing Rant and Rave for 10 plus years made me a better writer than almost anything else, because you see, like, look, and I've learned this too. I've learned this as a professional writer, is like, it's hard to execute something. I could give you notes on your screenplay that I couldn't necessarily give on my own.
Right.
You need that other perspective. But you see writers, when you see how a writer takes a note or runs with something, it's like so refreshing and beautiful when someone knows what they're doing, or more importantly, you just inspire them to try something new. Like, I always remember that Spirit Airlines bit you did, which was so great, because you had this paragraph on the top of it, and then you had that line like,
Flying Spirit Airlines.
Yeah, what was the line? The Spirit Airlines.
Flying Spirit Airlines is like being black in America.
No, I know. And it was like, bam. So you had a setup for that, and then you did it, and we took that out, and you did that setup, and it was like, you had to stop for like 3 minutes. By the way, to a primarily white audience.
Right, right, yeah.
Because that's something that you have that innate gift to do, is create something specific to your experience. But people, that's all they want. Like, that's all they want is to find a story that's, it's inclusive, not in its like letting people off the hook, but inclusive in the sense of, here's the specificity of my experience. I can relate to that.
And what's the experience you're wanting to bring people at this point?
I don't know about theater. Theater's been dark. I haven't, I had a play about 4 years ago. I love theater. I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to fit back into that. I just haven't had time, man. It's like, I've just been, making money, and this is a time in my career where I'm very busy in that sense. But I'm dying to get back into theater and to do it. When I started off in theater, it was like more of a, we built the theater ourselves. It's not like I wrote plays and said, hey, can you produce them? It's like, we fucking built the theater. You know what I mean? We did that. I had an outlet. And so it was never like, hey, I want to get a play and write it produced. It was always like, hey, I have this stage. I mean, Small Engine Repair was written because my wife was producing the late night thing, and I saw the Cormac McCarthy play they're playing. And I was like, she's like, you can use this set and this lighting grid. So it was like, oh shit, here's a story I want to tell. So I did it around that. And that's great. That sort of fertility of like creating shit, because it's probably similar to, what you do is you have a stand-up comedy or whatever, you have material and you're getting it in front of people. That sort of energy was what always drove me in theater. And I don't have that setup as much now. It's just different. So I have to figure it out.
It seems too that there's something about the limitation. How much do you think that played in for you as a producer and the things you learned?
I mean, Rant and Rage is a specific thing because it's an ensemble performance and you know all the pieces and you know the order of them and how they do and the rhythm of it. But for whatever reason, 1,500 words was just a battle-tested like time. If you kill it, that's like you got more than enough runway. And if you go up there, if it's challenging or something's not quite clicking, 1,500 words, you're still in and out. There's still love. It's still okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was. It's just that was sort of the sweet spot when you put everything together. And the pieces, you know, as we, you know, you got a prompt. So you guys are all writing your version of that prompt. So there's like a cumulative effect of all of them together. That's just how it worked. And it was hard, man. I mean, some people really, really fought it and tried to sneak stuff in. And it was like, I don't know how else to explain it. It's just this time that works. Oh, read it really fast. It's like everybody says that. And they're like, I timed it. It only took this long. I'm like, you have an audience. It's different.
They're going to react. They're going to laugh.
I don't know what it is. It's just like, you know, most songs are a certain length. And, you know, you see Chappelle's stand-up. It's like an hour and 5 minutes. It's like they're all, you know, in the same pocket.
That's what, that's about the attention span or what have you. For you, the actual experience of being a writer, like you said, you've been doing your work now, you've been out there, you know, small engine repair, all that. What has that experience been like for you as a writer compared to like what you expected it to be? I mean, you can go back as far as that third grader going, no, that was totally my story. But you know, like how has this actually played out for you and telling your truths compared to what you might have thought it was going to be?
Sure. Like? When you're doing it and you're getting paid to do it, obviously it's somewhat of a different thing. I mean, I feel very, very fortunate. To me, I feel like it's defined by wanting to work. I've been, there's certain people that I've worked with over and over again because that's as rewarding as anything. You know, I think I was shocked by how much of a sort of crapshoot it is when something gets made. I mean, I'd say 2 or 3 of the scripts that I've written that I'm like, the studio flipped out over. They're just fucking sitting there.
Right.
For various reasons beyond your control. The only thing you can control is writing the best shit you can.
Yeah.
But like that doesn't determine whether something always gets made or not. Which is okay. So you kind of do it. Right. I think early in my career, I didn't have as much stuff offered to me. So I didn't have to make any hard choices. It was just like, this is what you got.
Right.
You know, you do it and you invest in it and you service it.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, this will build. And then suddenly get to a point where you're like having to say no to things. And there's that stress, like, should I do this? Should I not do that?
Yeah.
Which path you know, that was the thing is, and I had an agent say that you're defined as much by what you say no to as what you say yes to.
Yeah.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah, but you know, there's still the beauty of theater is you put it up, and the audience taught me more about writing than anything else. You know? Yeah,
just in terms of where they reacted, or what
you can sense it. That communal experience of doing that. I mean, you write a screenplay. Best case scenario, it's in front of cameras a year later, and then in front of an audience a year after that. So from the time you finished it, you have 2 years before you're in an audience. Hearing what you have, whereas a play you can, you know, especially if you built the theater company, you can get your pages in front of an audience in 3 weeks.
Yeah. No, I like that. I like the immediacy of that. Where from here for you, like as a writer? Where do you see yourself taking things? And you know, I'm innately a hustler. It's hard to just turn that off. I have a real hard time saying no to stuff, but you know, directing a movie that was very well received as open doors. I really want to, and I have a couple things lined up, but I want to, what I loved about directing was it was wheels up for a bit. And this was my only focus, you know, as opposed to writing for someone else. I wrote for myself and for the end game of that. And I love that. And to me, it's like, if that's all I did, I'd be happy. Oh, no, it's not true. I like writing for other people too, but I'm dying to do that again. I mean, the pandemic totally fucked that process to some extent. It just took longer. I wanted to direct. I have a couple of scripts I've written or in the process of writing that I would like to direct. To direct yourself. While I'm writing these other things. To me, that's that big gamble of doing small engine repair opened that door for me.
So now I'm like, okay, what do I do with that? Open door. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like, no one saw that movie and was like, oh my God, here's this script that this other person wrote. Will you go direct this? It's all like, oh shit, what are you going to write and direct next? Like that was the thing. And that's cool because like, I think probably, I don't know, 40% of my directing is done on the page. So that makes sense. I don't know if I could do it another way, but so yeah, that's sort of my next thing. My next frontier is to direct a movie, a bigger canvas, hopefully.
And what was it like to direct yourself? Because I've done the writer-director thing too, and so I can ask you about that. But I was, the movie opens, and here we are, and really the first face really we see is yours, and I'm like, man, what the heck? I mean, like, I felt like I had a lot to do on set. I felt like I had plenty to do on set.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's. I mean, it wasn't easy. I think it would have to be the right material, but that was a singular opportunity because like I had played the character on stage in multiple productions. I knew it. When you're focused on the acting and the truth of the moment, you tune everything else out. Okay. But more importantly, it's like that character is coiled rage and anxiety and stress and loves everybody and needs them, but is like an ulterior motive. And like, that's kind of like directing. So I was just able to bottle all of that shit and just put it in the performance and not think about it. And it was great. And, those guys, the actors in the scenes were, some of my best friends. So it was like fucking beautiful and fun. And, no matter what happened with the movie, I was like, we have this. And that was great. I think my naivete allowed me to do it. Knowing what it was going to be, it made it harder, but like, I don't regret it. I think, you should try to, push yourself to those things. Like artistically, I would have always regretted it if I didn't try, right. And I learned a ton, both, and I haven't, I checked that box. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
But you have to, for that particular flavor of filmmaking, which, not a whole lot of people do, but quite a few do, I talked to a lot of directors, but, my big thing is I had to be very, very buttoned down in pre-production and know most of the big decisions as to what was going on and sort of the whole style of the movie. And look, we didn't have the money, nor did I want to like yell cut, run to the, the monitors and replay it. Like we just kept shooting. Okay. They'll figure it out. Like I trust you. Shoot it, not documentary style because all the shots were planned out, but it was let's just run another take. Like why pause it and rewatch it? Like just roll it again. Because the movie was hinged on the performances of which were rehearsed deeply, and everything was rehearsed well in advance, like a play. So that there were no like surprises, so to speak.
What was that piece like with the rehearsal, and how much time did you have, and some of what you brought? Well,
look, man, the play was, I mean, the when I finished the screenplay and we were getting the pieces together, it was like not in limbo. It was just waiting mostly for Bernthal's schedule for something to open up. He had a movie that was supposed to start when we did Small Engine, and it was like, falling apart and all that stuff. So we just had to be agile. So it was like, okay, that thing doesn't happen. We have a window with John, who was a producer and a partner. So we're like, we went for it. But, once we rehearsed it, John, Shay, and myself sat in this office, like around a table for, 6 weeks when we could. Wow. And then towards the end, not 6 weeks every day, but like a day here. Yeah. And I would get stuff and then I'd rewrite it and we'd get together. We just kept going through the script again. People asking questions, changing the lines, the way I, as a writer, create a play, which is, there's, and this is why you got to cast right, because there are some actors who are lazy and they're like, I don't get what you wrote. Let me just make it myself. But that's not the actors I had. The actors I had were like, as they start getting deeper and asking deeper and more specific questions, it illuminates stuff that you may not have thought about or you didn't know. Because you write, you know the story. Yeah. But once a good actor, when you cast right, they will go down the mine shaft of that character deeper than you do, even as the writer. Yeah. And they're going to discover stuff, and they're going to inform you. The work and the homework they're doing is going to inform you as the writer. Hey, you know what? This, and this. And you're like, all right. And you start just kind of go with that.
What's it like as a father bringing that energy in? Because when you first wrote Small Engine Repair, Sophie would have been what? Like
4.
4.
4 right? or 5. Yeah.
And now you're making it and our kids are in high school now.
Yeah.
It's a different. So did you find yourself as you were doing the character bringing something new to it, or is it? Yeah.
No, I mean, look, the funny thing is I feel like having a son made it made it muddier.
Interesting.
Because it was like, the Chad character in the original thing was he wasn't a straw man by any means, but it was more like, I know that guy and I could kill him with my bare hands, so to speak. And then that archetype, that kid.
Sure.
The character meaning. And then, later on, I was like, well, this is more complicated, which is always lends itself. Now, look, the play obviously is different. You do different things on stage than you do in a film.
Sure.
I know a lot of actors, like when they deal with something, I mean, look, the adage always goes like, as an actor, don't really go to a place that you haven't dealt with. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're in a scene where someone has a gun on you and you were held at gunpoint once and you've never dealt with that trauma and you bring that up on stage or in front of camera, it's going to control you. You're not controlling it. Maybe some people do that. I've never had to do that. I'm able to access all the elements of that particular character pretty easily. And look, in some ways, as you cathartically and you go in and maybe it's hard to shake it off for a little bit, but I always found, because of the way I was raised and the way I was come from, which was stoic containment of emotions and not let anything touch you. Anytime I'm able to express emotions somehow, I mean, look, that's a lesson you learn as a guy when you grow up in this masculine culture. And then you're with I have all these sisters or a girlfriend or a wife or a daughter, and you see them break down and cry. And your impulse is like, you're gonna be okay. Like, stop.
Why are you doing that?
You know what? They get it out.
Right.
And then they're okay.
Right.
And you're like, wait, what?
Right.
Because I'm like, if I cried like that and broke down, I'm like, can I come back?
Right.
You know?
How do I recover from this? Right.
How do I recover from that? Because everything is ingrained in me not to. So one beautiful thing about art and acting in particular was, you go and you explore that. And you again, you don't let the emotions control you, but you can fall in love on stage. You can cry. You can expose this litany of stuff through the prism of that character, which allows a degree of safety. Which is why so many people love acting so much. It's like,
I love that mix. I love that, like, when you bring all, not just you, when I get to do it, bring all that energy that we're talking about and that understanding of these male spaces or that whatever,
right.
And then but you do fall in love and you do experience grief and what do you do with that? Like what you just described, what do you actually do with that? I guess I'm wondering where that's allowed you to go, if anywhere. Like, do you feel like it's impacted you in the other direction as a person that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if I had never, there's no question that fear probably took 5 to 10 years away from my career. Fear of admitting, of really committing to what I in my heart wanted to do. I think if I would have just denied all that stuff, I think I just would have been someone who had a part of themselves that was like quietly desperate and sad and never content, that kind of thing, and bitter maybe, I don't know. But like once, and look, this is to our point earlier, it's like once you go in the arena and you do something, I don't care if you're white, black, gay, straight, trans, whatever the fuck you are, as an artist, when you're in that arena where all that stuff sheds away and it's just you and the art and does it work and does it function, when you emerge from that, you suddenly transcend that. You suddenly start looking at other artists as like, fuck, dude, I know what that's like. You're a peer. You're like, you've been bloodied in that same arena.
Yeah.
And there's a respect we have for one another.
Yes.
I think it really bothers me when I see an artist shitting on another artist or calling out something, or their accent wasn't good in this, or whatever, or his thing, or why I need to see another thing by a white guy, or they only gave that woman that thing because she's a black woman. Whatever. You're like, none of that matters, because it's so fucking hard to make it work. It's so hard to create something that touches somebody, that it's like so much respect needs to be given to that. And that, like, it's almost like that's what I love about the arts, is that you're in a community. And what I hate is the stuff we do to divide each other or categorize each other and do that, where I'm like, I'm like, I want to see a beautiful story, man. I want to hear great music. I want to do this. Like, I want to see stand-up comedy that's funny as fuck. Like, I don't care. It doesn't need to make me feel better. It doesn't need to do that.
So you talked about the fear in the arena. How did you summon the courage to go in there? Because I think it shows up differently for different people.
I mean, look, I can remember I went to film school when I was like 21, and I was as an actor in a bunch of these short films, and I was just like, fuck it, go for it. Who's gonna watch it? And I was like, you know, when you leave your hometown, it was the first time I'd ever like been away.
Okay.
And I was in this. It's funny, man. I was just telling somebody this the other day. It's like, if you would have asked me as I was driving up to the NYU summer thing, I was like, yeah, I'm middle class. And then I get to this class and I'm like, oh, I'm poor. Like, fuck. This is what wealthy people look like. Right. Like the wealthiest dude in the town I grew up with was like, the dad bought the kid a Mercedes. And you're like, now I'm in this film class with people who are like unbelievable, intimidating wealth. Yeah. Yeah. But look different than anyone I'd ever been, all over the world, every skin color, every, religion, every sexual orientation, everything. And I fucking love that. Like I found when I was around people who didn't look like me or have a background like me, I actually found out who I was there. Because when you're surrounded by, and not necessarily an echo chamber, but when you're surrounded by people who have such shared background as you, you're kind of amorphous. And then when you're suddenly around like someone from South Africa and you're talking about it and you're like, yeah, I fucking mowed lawns. And they're like, what is that like? And you're like, oh, yeah, I did that. Like everything I thought was so mundane is interesting. And conversely to someone else, what is your life experience? Let's find those common traits. Do you know what I'm saying? And I remember being 21 and look, I always wanted to the adventuresome of like being around a more diverse. And when I say diverse, I don't just mean black and white. I mean diversity of everything. But the only thing we had in common was that we were all there to make movies. And I could talk endlessly. There was like a model from this African model, literally from Africa. Strongest accent ever. We sat there and talked about Reservoir Dogs for like a half hour. You know what I mean? Like I talked to her more about movie than anybody I grew up with. You know what I mean? And then I was like in her film and I'm meeting all these people and like, it was great. Right. Because you had that shared commonality and the terror of, look, we can say whatever we want, but once you put something on film and project it, like if it works, fucking A, man. Yeah. I don't care what you are. Yeah. That's hard.
It's really hard.
Yeah. And it was like, that was this unbelievable awakening I had.
Where do you think that came from for you? Because my sense, we've talked about our growing up. I don't get the sense that everybody you grew up with was like, let me out into the world so I can meet all the different people. Like, so where did that come from for you that you were like,
well, you talk about the fear. I think to me, the psychology of it was very specific, which is I came from a family and a background that was like, don't talk about shit. Bottle it down. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't embarrass other people. I mean, look, you know what's great is when you see, I'll talk about Chappelle because he's one of my favorites. Like he will say shit that I disagree with. He will say shit that is beautiful or articulate or whatever. Like, but you see somebody who's just throwing it out there. And there's the balls it takes to do that. So I was always like, I didn't have that, but I had it in me. So much to say and do and provoke and do that. So I feel like it was this New England sort of stoic thing. And it was also like, you see something happening, but like, let's not talk about it. So I was always like, I'm going to go insane. And I needed to find outlets to do that, to express myself, to communicate what was going on in me. And man, it's like, I don't say this lightly. I feel like the artistic side of me, I like closeted it because I was afraid of the fear it took to say, this is who I am. I mean, look, man, people don't realize that. It's like when you grow up somewhere where there's literally not a fucking single artistic person. Other than like some of my mom's friends who are like taking a painting class. Right. Yeah, it's like, nobody wrote a poem. No one wrote a short story. You meet some in college, but then it's like, okay, it's a really good short story, but like, where are you going to get a job? What are you going to do? So then I was just like looking for people to give me the license to do that. And then when I was in acting class and I started writing plays, I started writing monologues for students in my class. And then I wrote one-act plays. And then the first one-act play I produced, I remember it so specifically. it was this play I'd written. And again, write about what you know and all this stuff. And it was like a brother and a sister. It was called The Funeral. And it was like, they're in a room and it's a bed covered in jackets. Cause I don't know how it was, but like when you get together, everyone just throws all their jackets in one room. So it's like, I played this like character who is, it's not like I was creating characters that they were composites of things that I knew at that point acting enough that I'm like, I can work. So it was kind of like a slight version of maybe the Frank character in Small and Repair. But he was this guy and, their dad died and he went up there to find some fucking breath mints for his annoying aunt in the jackets, and his sister, who had moved to California, came up and visited him, and they just start, having the first open conversation they've had in 5 years since she moved. Wow. And it was just a conversation of stuff I was learning in therapy because I just started therapy. And it was just so amazing. So anyway, we did it. And then the director was directing the piece because it was going to have an audience. I rehearsed it in class a bunch of times.
Right.
And there's a thing called like a fourth wall. I mean, you know what the fourth wall is. Like, I didn't understand it. I just didn't understand it. I was like, fourth wall. And they were like, I just overcomplicated. Like, there's a window right here in the fourth wall. And it just means like you open yourself up and there's the reality of what that is. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, how do I do this? Am I supposed to open the window?
Right,
like, I was terrified to like mime. And he's like, no, not do that. So he had one part in the play where I was supposed to have this like moment and walk up to the window of the fourth wall and look out at the audience and kind of have this moment, not to her, but open to the audience, a theatrical device. And so we're doing rehearsal on an opening night of this play. And in my head, it was like you're skiing towards a jump. And at the last second, I veered off because I was afraid. And I cheated and I did it like that. And he's like, that was really great. But he's like, if you don't fucking look out at that audience, I'm going to take my name off the program. I mean, he was kind of joking, but he was like, not really. This is what you need. Do not let fear. You wrote this thing. You're the character. You did the work. You're doing a disservice to your play, to this actress who's taken time off from her life to be in it, from the people who paid to buy tickets, from everything. Like, fuck you. Get over that and do it. Even if you fail, don't let fear be the reason you did. So then it literally was that visualization of doing that. And I went up, and I'm not saying it was the most profound moment, but I didn't let fear own that moment.
Right.
And I looked through that window and I did it. And everything was easier after that, to be honest, because I did it. And I was suddenly no longer like, I don't care if I'm foolish. I don't care if everyone I grew up with thinks I'm a complete weirdo for doing this shit. I don't care. Because the truth of that moment was just like, this is who you're in communion with. And ever since then I was like, why didn't I figure this out, earlier in life?
Right. I love too, like that capital T truth. Where you've been on, like that was something I found myself yelling at a certain point, like not yelling, but like I was on to this, like, just tell the truth. Like, even sometimes I didn't even really have, a direction of like, I want you to do this, or, oh, I need you to play this as if, or any of that stuff. It was just like, just tell the truth. Like, and that became, actually, as the shoot went on, I found myself saying it more often, just tell the truth. I feel like we have a very weird relationship with the truth. I mean, these days, obviously, politically, we've talked about all that, but also I feel like our lives right now can be so curated, even if we're not like, and of course there's the Instagram, oh, here's my Lamborghini. It's not really my Lamborghini, but there's also, anytime you edit, you are altering the truth. If I put a picture up of me with Daphne smiling, I'm not putting up the picture of me like, all right, I'll do the dishes, right? So like, I guess my question to you and all that is, do you find yourself choosing a truth, or is there just a truth that is burning inside of you? Like, I know you're not aiming it to like fix the world's ills, but does the truth come to you and then you say, all right, how am I going to get to that? Or is it more these characters come to you and they start doing what they're doing? Like, I've definitely had that experience where I'm in a room and going like, all right, well, I didn't expect you to do that, but let's see where it goes.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, look, I think it's a combination of things. I think you can't be blind to the moment you are in when you're creating, but you can't cater to the curative experience that you're talking about. Meaning, like, the concept of virtue signaling, I think, has no place in the creation of art. Now, your truth might be in line with what is trending to that thing at the moment, which is great. And by the way, if I'm an audience, I can tell the difference. No matter what my life experience is, I know when the art is coming out of, hey, I'm compelled to tell this truth, as opposed to, you know what, this is what people seem to be reacting to. It's the same as like when I first started working as a professional writer, you know what was the trend? With fucking vampires. Everything had vampires in it. And I had an agent tell me early on, I had written this pilot, and they were like, look, I'm not saying put vampires in it, but what is the hook thing? And I was like, but this is an industry, and like if you approach truth because it's the vampire of the moment, then you're doing a disservice and the audience knows it. But by all means, should you go on a journey to tell the type of story that you want? I just think that the collective IQ of an audience goes up. I think people are smarter. Like I don't like, look, I'm not necessarily capable of creating art in theater or on film that is designed to make the person who's looking to be offended not be offended. I've seen people try that and it almost never works. You're always going to upset someone.
What's your vibe when you experience somebody who looks like they're trying to like dodge all the mines in the minefield? Like,
I mean, I feel like you can't do that and make a delicious meal. I just don't think you can. I think, you know, I just look to the greats and the people that I did and the people who moved the needle. You know, I was helping Sophie recently with her AP English, and one of the pieces is Maya Angelou getting the Pulitzer Prize in her speech. And what she was saying is that use your language to tell your truth, right? And when you don't have language, you start creating oppressive truths, meaning it's complicated. So if my language is like, look, I wrote a movie or I wrote a play and it's thorny, it's complicated, but I'm using my language and you have to let that illuminate you. But if you don't have that apparatus, and if you're doing it for political reasons or you know other reasons to get people to like you or whatever, then you're limiting your language and you're becoming didactic. And do you see what I'm saying? Meaning like I can be bratty. I can be punk rock on purpose. And, you know, I can do that because, again, raising up an environment is like, I can't say that. Fuck you. I'm going to say that.
No, I'm going to say it. Right,
now, you want to be aware of the impact of what you're doing does. Because I think, look, certain words, certain situations, certain things have a chemical reaction and you can't deny the chemical reaction they create.
Right.
But like, if you build a fire and someone like jumps in it and they're like, I got burned, you're like, yeah. I mean, I think to some extent, you know, my biggest issue with that is like, you know, the analogy I use, there's this movie called What Women Want that Mel Gibson was in.
I remember that. Yeah,
man. So he gets this thing, man, and he starts reading women's minds. And at first he's like, this is awesome because I can get laid. I can do all this stuff. And it's really funny. And then it takes a darker turn where he's like, oh my God, everything they're saying is going on. And it's like people are complicated and doing all this stuff. And like, it's too much. It's overwhelming. I'm like, to me, that's what social media is. Actually, when I'm really deeply working on something, I mean, I've had to kind of pull a lot back because I don't want to innately hurt people's feelings. But like, if you go on Twitter and investigate a subject, everyone disagrees. If I wrote, I love peanut butter, I'm going to get death threats over that. Do you know what I mean? So you just have to like, I don't know, because I'm not like, I can't please everybody. So you got to then at the end of the day, be the truthful. And to me, it's all about, you know, one-on-one conversations with people I love and respect. I mean, look, again, I've always, Small Engine Repair, for example, has a lot of provocative language to it. But I'm like, I'm writing a play for my sisters. I'm writing a play for the smartest fucking woman in the room that I know. And I'm investigating themes through my lens and this reality, shit that they've told me. So I know, for example, they will get what I'm trying to say. And you have to be like, I'm good enough with that. That's okay. There's going to be people who are offended or people are doing that. I mean, that's a particularly provocative thing, but like, you can't do anything without upsetting some people. And again, that's why I think that the danger of social media is the currency of social media is to find offense. And that's the point is like, you sit down with somebody and you talk to them. I mean, like one of our mutual friends, Kemp Powers, right? Like one of my dearest friends. I value that relationship above almost any I've ever had in my life because when I met Kemp early on, he grew up working class in Brooklyn. I grew up working class in New Hampshire. And we just developed this bond where it was like, let's just not worry about what we say. Not just about race, about background, but let's be very unfiltered with each other and non-judgment. And, you know, Kevin would be like, man, let me tell you why you're wrong with that. Let me tell you. And I was like, shit. Wow. So I'm able to have a relationship and an experience with someone that I'm not worried about offending. Yeah. Because I'm not trying to offend. Right. But if I might ask questions that are offensive, it's not like, fuck you, I can't believe you asked that. It's like, look, dude, come on. This is how it is. And that happened at a part of my life where it was incredible. If you knew someone only in like, you know, the social media way, you wouldn't have that and you wouldn't learn. If you're afraid of constantly offending and doing that. And by the way, it's like, I want to explore in my art things that I don't have an answer for. Right. And that's what I mean is like, when I see something tacked on, the utopic version of what the world should be. Right. Now that's cool. And I see I totally see the value in doing that for our children and for a kid to see themselves represented on a large enough screen. It's incredible. But we go overboard when we start treating everybody like their children. And it's like, let's start, you know what I mean? And by the way, like, throw it away. Create characters that just fucking exist. Right. And don't exist as a political statement that you want to make to please someone else. Just let them exist.
So my question then is, I totally hear you. We're not creating from that space. You got to tell your stories. You know, I'm with you on that. But you put it out in the world, right? And whether it's, hey man, fascinating look at manhood, or oh, I can't believe they, you know, use that language to talk about women or this or that. How open are you to engaging at that point in the conversation, your work or anyone else's work? Because, you know, obviously, you know, one night in Miami with Kemp, and you know, there was a lot in there. I mean, I remember being at the first reading and just being like, whew.
Well, I mean, as a playwright, those readings can be helpful, but they're a disaster. Like, here's what I would say to some extent. I mean, I look at One Night in Miami, and obviously I've been buddies with Kemp, seeing this beautiful trajectory of that. But what I would say to somebody who had a question, I'd be like, watch the movie. He already had his answer. There it is.
That's the answer.
Okay. You interpret it. And like, if I tell you this stuff, you know, it shouldn't matter. I mean, I've spoke to classes or whatever like that. Right. I've seen a change happen somewhat recently where people are now like wanting their material to be specifically for this thing, you know, to target that. And, you know, again, I don't care, but I can tell when it's good and when it's done well and when it's truthful. I don't care what it's about, what its intent is. It either does that or not. And it's just really hard to do. But, you know, like, man, I've done plenty of talkbacks and do that. And usually what happens is people don't like to feel things. And they have the reaction to feeling things range from change the channel on that song, it makes me sad, it reminds me of this breakup, or I love this. I've always been someone who had trouble articulating his emotions in real life. So I love sad music. I'll watch a sad movie. I mean, it changes a little bit actually having kids and getting older, but so much of it, like, I love soulful female singers. I love their music because in a way it accesses an emotion in me that I don't naturally, through nature, nurture, or whatever, have access to. So I like that. I just like shit that makes me feel stuff. And it may even make me feel angry or a call to arms and all that stuff. And I just think we can't be afraid of feeling something.
Yeah. What would you say to the person who isn't necessarily an official storyteller that they can be doing, thinking about, facing to become a better storyteller in their life and through their life, like in like getting that story of who they are out? Like, they're not necessarily gonna write that poem. But yeah, what would you say?
I mean, I think to me it's like, and that's one of my favorite things to do, and my wife's always like makes fun of me for that. I love meeting new people, being in new situations, reading and just being exposed to stuff and having an opinion on things. You know, man, it's like one of the things, there's so much more that unites us than doesn't, you know, and you're in the middle of, you're on a layover in fucking Iowa, and you're sitting there in line to get food for your kids over there. And you look at the woman next to you who's got the kids, and you're like, man, 7-year-old is fun. And they're like, let me tell you about it. You do that, like that moment of connection. Like, I love that. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's like, I'm just outgoing like that. Like I like walking around. Like when I used to live in where you live in that neighborhood for 5 years. My favorite thing I missed the most about that is like I'd bring the dog for a walk up and down in View Park, take me like an hour and a half, and just stop with everybody and talk. You have a conversation and little things like that. To me, that's the root of it. I just genuinely love that. Yeah. I just love that connection. And to me, that's the root of all this, is like creating connection and having people. And by the way, it'd be a lie if I didn't say I love it when what I'm trying to say or do connects with people. I obviously had the opportunity to see Small Engine Repair multiple times as a play because I was in the fucking thing in LA and New York. Right. But, with the pandemic, we had maybe 2 screenings of Small Engine Repair. One was in LA with a bunch of family and friends, and it was obviously a stacked deck, and it was great. But then John and I did one Q&A, the only public screening Q&A we ever did, in person in DC. It was awesome, dude. It was like 90% Black audience. And it was just a different world. I bring that up because it was a different world than the world of the movie. Sure, yeah. And to hearing the reactions and all this stuff. And by the way, that's a Q&A I love, because people were like, here's my experience growing up in downtown DC, and I saw this connection. Like, I loved that. But I was like, fuck yeah, because if you're truthful and specific, the universal thing will happen.
I always come back to that. I'm like, I think at some point may have been in a car going through New Hampshire. That's as much as I got, right? But I sit and I watch and I listen and I think about groups of guys I've been in and who picked on who and who was okay to pick on and who wasn't okay to pick on and who we looked out for and who you knew you could depend on. And I do think if you try to be general in a funny way, you miss everybody. And
you do.
You know what I mean? And I do remember when you said with the Spirit Airlines piece, like, get that paragraph out. Like, that's your open, man. Like, just go right to that.
Well, because that's funny, because like, I may not be Black, but I know what Spirit Airlines, I know what flying on that shit show is.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, is that what it's being Black? Oh my God, it's hilarious. It's tragic and funny, but more importantly, it's like, that idea of gatekeeping. It's like, your piece is like, the gate's open for the duration of this piece. And that's why I think good writing in many ways does.
Well, I'm going to remind you now and just let everybody know, check out Small Engine Repair. It is available on HULU, which I know for sure because I rewatched it. And anything else you want folks to be paying attention to right now?
Man, I feel like I have 18 pots bubbling on the stove. I'm just waiting for the next one. But Small Engine Repair is on HULU right now, which, go see it. It was a lot of work to do it. And then we released it on during the pandemic, so kind of got fucked on that, but now people are watching it, which is great.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's awesome. And I love your work. So listen, we will talk. Buddy. I appreciate you, man. Take it easy.
Have a good one.
Later, man. All right, y'all know what time it is. It's time to walk the line. And here's your walk the line for this time around. Make art. I got to thinking about my conversation with John and want to thank him again for being on and want to thank him for being such a good friend and a fellow artist and all those good things. But I got to thinking about our conversation, what he was saying about how we have this opportunity when we create. He was talking about theater, but it's true about so many things that we create that we're able to impact other people. We might impact their thinking. We might impact their actions. We might impact how they impact others. We are in this position where we can create and we can impact others. And I thought about Seth Godin, who you've heard me talk about and who I have a lot of respect for. And he was talking about the fact that it's our job to make art. And I sort of leaned into that. What do you mean by it? And he's talking about the fact that it's not just about a painting or a poem or a short story. It's that when we create, when we give, when we create from ourselves, when we put something there that wasn't there before, and we offer it up to the world, we offer it up to the people around us, when we offer it up to someone we know might have a need that this is going to help them to deal with, an itch, this is going to help them to scratch. When we do those things, we're creating art. We're offering our art to the world. So yeah, it might be the movie that you're gonna write and direct, but it might be the lesson plan that you come up with for those students that gets them from what's gonna be on the test to that's fascinating. I'm fascinated. Someday when I'm 10, 20 years from here, I'm going to reread this book because a seed was planted here today. Art. Create. Give of yourself. Put it into the world. Make this world a better place. And believe me, if we all get about this business of making art, we can get unstuck. If we could be unstuck. And we can live unstuck. Unstuck as fuck. Now, let's walk the line.